of course, you would consume the manganese, you would have to replace the catalyst. But if the catalyst is cheap enough, you could probably discard it, or there may be ways to regenerate the catalyst and get this something out. But that seems to be the way it works.
You mentioned dispersion as one of the important parameters. What is the current state of affairs using zeolite supports to enhance dispersion of metal fluids?
Oh, well, to use a zeolite, I don't think you will get any higher dispersion, at least for cobalt, because the cobalt will not get into the pores of the zeolite, so it's just sitting outside. So I don't think you will get any more, any higher dispersion than with a typical support like silica or aluminum. Whereas with noble metals, you can of course get very high dispersion in zeolites, but not with cobalt. With ruthenium you can. Jim Goodwin and others have done work.
Send Mr. Hall to our congressman talk about reformulated gasoline. We don't think it's too good about it. Our next talk is entitled An Isotopic Tracer Study of Sulfur Exchange and Cold Liquefaction Catalysts. The authors are Diane Millburn, Rita Hardy, and Bertrand Davis from the Center for Applied Energy Research, and Diane Millburn is our speaker.
Commercially available catalysts which are used in hydroprocessing of the heavy, high-boiling liquids, such as those that are produced in cold liquefaction, typically consist of either nickel or cobalt-demoted molybdenum on aluminum oxide. A good deal of effort has gone into developing these catalysts with high dispersion of metal on the support and of maintaining this high dispersion throughout the lifetime of the catalyst to minimize deactivation and extend the lifetime. The series that, when one looks at the literature over the past 10 to 15 years, you see that there is quite a good deal of debate in terms of describing the active phase and especially the role of the promoter in the catalyst. One thing that is sort of generally agreed upon is that the active phase is a metal sulfide. So with this in mind, we set out on this study trying to use sort of a different technique in looking at the working catalyst, and that is the use of the natural abundance of a stable sulfur isotope, which is sulfur 34, in comparing the products with the reactants and trying to get a handle for the working catalyst to process conditions. The samples which I will be discussing have been obtained from the largest currently operating cold liquefaction facility in this country, which is the pilot plant at Wilsonville, Alabama. It's a 6-ton per day coal processing facility. These particular catalysts that were used in this run are a nickel moly on aluminum oxide extrudate purchased from the Amoco company. The run in question is run 257, which was made with an Illinois number 6 bituminous coal from the Burning Star mine, and it was made in the so-called close-coupled integrated two-stage liquefaction process configuration. Go into that just a little bit. What this means in terms of the catalyst is that you have two reactors sitting side by side. The feed to the first reactor is coal, hydrogen, a process solvent, and a heavier resist material which is produced in the deashing unit. This contains some coal ash and other solids. The first stage reactor is considered to be the dissolver, and it is run at the lowest possible severity conditions, and the function is primarily to dissolve the coal at the lowest conditions. The products from that reactor then are passed directly to the second stage reactor in this configuration with no pressure let down. And the conditions here are a little bit higher temperature and higher pressure. And this is where they consider the hydro-treating reactions to be occurring, and those include such things as hydrodesulfurization, hydrodenitrogenation, deoxygenation, cracking, hydrogenation, that type of thing. The reactors themselves are an emulated bed type reactor, shown here. Approximately 200 pounds of catalyst are loaded into each of these reactors, and in this particular run, both reactors were running catalytic mode with the same catalyst, the amp. For the initial period of the run, the reactors were in batch deactivation mode, such that the only catalyst that was removed at a given time was a small, about a pound, for sampling purposes out of the 200 pounds, and then that equivalent amount of catalyst was added to maintain constant bed. So that with the mixing, our samples had very constant age, and we did not see an age profile of that process. After the first 20 to 30 days, they began operating with addition withdrawal, so that significant fractions of the catalyst to bed were added and withdrawn, and those were not useful in this particular type of study. The samples come to us covered in a process-derived oil. We extract them prior to analysis with tetrahydrofuran and a SOXO apparatus. Before analysis, they dry them in a vacuum oven and do our analysis. Before starting a run at Wilsonville, they pre-sulfide the catalyst, and this is done in a mixture of dimethyl disulfide and a diesel-like oil with hydrogen. And what is done is the reactor is slowly brought up to temperature, which is very similar to the actual operating temperature of the run. It is maintained at this pressure and temperature until H2S breakthrough is observed, and then held there for another 4 or 5 hours, and then brought back down to ambient pressure and temperature and drummed out until use, so that all the catalyst is sulfided before the run is begun. We do our elemental analyses and our physical characterizations in-house, but we do not have capabilities to do the sulfur 34 analysis. These are done at a commercial laboratory in Texas. We started out by sending duplicate samples to this laboratory and also to the Illinois Geological Survey, and got essentially the same results. So now we are just using the commercial lab. When they receive the extracted catalyst, they combust it in a car bomb, recovering the sulfur as barium sulfate. Then a measured quantity of the barium sulfate is thermally decomposed, and the products are sent to a mass spectrometer. The results are reported as del 34S values, which is simply the ratio of sulfur 34 to sulfur 32 for the sample, as compared to that of laboratory standard. And it is reported in parts per thousand. Typical catalyst compositions, elemental compositions, are shown here for the second reactor, for which we have more data points, as weight percent with time, and molybdenum and nickel remain constant, as well as sulfur. Carbon is rapidly deposited in the first day or two of operation, and then that level is maintained pretty much constant throughout this time period also. The minor or less abundant species are shown here. Iron and calcium remain fairly constant after the first day or two of operation. The nitrogen compounds are put on very rapidly also, and then we see a decrease in those with time, corresponding to an increase in the sodium, and that's a whole other area that we've done some work with. And also titanium we see going on with time also. When we received the analysis of the sulfur 34 values, this plot shows for the second reactor, because again we did have more data points for that. It ran longer in the batch deactivation mode. What we see when we compare the pre-sulfided catalyst with the feed coal values and then the spent catalyst on stream are basically two rates of sulfur exchange. We see on startup, or at least in the first day or two of operation, a rapid exchange of the pre-sulfidation sulfur with that of the sulfur from the coal slurry. This corresponds to about 33 to 34% of the total sulfur pool on the catalyst. Then, following that, we see a much slower exchange of initially present sulfur with that of the coal slurry. And assuming that this is an exchange reaction and that it is first order, we can fit a line to the data with a slope of 0.022, which we calculate that a minimum of 91 days would be required for all the sulfur initially present on the catalyst to be exchanged with that from the coal slurry feed. The data for the first reactor show a similar trend. Unfortunately, we don't have many points. Different batches of pre-sulfided catalysts were used, so we have a lower del 34S value. But again, we see this initial rapid exchange of sulfur and then a more gradual exchange. Now, I think you'll agree with me that you could fit any one of a number of lines through that data, but actually, if you compare it, this is on a slightly different scale, but if you compare it with the data from the second reactor, you can see that it's not unreasonable to say that it is similar in the trend. The workers who have reported the studies on the active phase of the catalyst refer to the molybdenum sulfide as an MOS2-like crystal, and the stoichiometries which are reported range from about MOS 1.75 down to about MOS 1.5. When we looked at the sulfur molar ratios for this catalyst, we came up with much higher ratios. Here the filled circles represent the second reactor, the open squares are for the first reactor. The black data points are uncorrected. In other words, all the sulfur is assumed to be associated with molybdenum. Probably a much more realistic view is to assume that the nickel promoter is also in the sulfide phase. So correcting the data for NIS phase gives us a lower sulfur to molar ratio, but still well above 2, anywhere from 2.25 to about 2.6 almost. When I went back and corrected for all the trace metals and for iron that are deposited on the catalyst, if we assume that all of those are also sulfided, and we correct the sulfur to molar ratio for that, we do lower, the sulfur to molar ratio is lower and is more in line with that reported in the literature. That I think Massive Group estimates about 1.75. But now this again is assuming that all the calcium, titanium, vanadium, sodium, everything is present as its sulfide. If we take all these other metal sulfides and assume that they are responsible for the rapid exchange that is seen initially in time, we can contribute for about 28% of the total sulfur pool. And as you remember, what we measured was more like 34%. So this to us indicates at least one possible explanation for this is that we are seeing a stable molybdenum sulfide, small particle, stable species here. Because certainly if we saw small crystallites through reaction migrating and, say, sintering to form large particles, we would expect to see much more rapid exchange, and we would expect to see more participation of the molybdenum sulfide in that sulfur exchange. Most of the literature which discusses active phase has been done on cobalt-promoted catalysts. And of course, these are nickel-promoted catalysts. So we thought it would be a good idea to prepare a series of catalysts with different promoters and try to see if we could observe any effects of changing the promoter. Preliminary results would show that for molybdenum on aluminum oxide catalyst prepared by incipient wetness, that cobalt-promoted catalyst shows a sulfur molar ratio